We're back with our latest installment of Operation Gladio meets Secret Societies with War Hamster Brady. How are you today, Brady?
I am good. Looking forward to today.
I know you gave me the teaser right before we started, so I'm looking forward to it. Let's jump right in.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting ready for this one. I kind of felt like a little kid before Christmas, so this one really should be fun. Oops. All right,
That's really
so
sad to say when we're talking about such awful people. But anyway, go ahead. I feel the same way.
I enjoy this. I enjoy this work with you. It really is fun. Um, so let's jump in. Recap for people who have not been following this whole series. Basically, been talking about secret societies, specifically Skull and Bones for now. And basically how all these people, they come from these establishment Eastern Puritan families, the blue bloods that really run our country, and they go to the private prep schools. Almost all of them do. They go to Yale University, where they become members of Skull and Bones, 15 members every year as a junior. And apparently it's more than just some little fraternal organization, because a lot of these characters seem to find themselves in the unlikeliest of places, including running the CIA, President of the United States, Supreme Court Justice, bunch of State Department, Chamber of Commerce, you name it. If it has to do with our foreign policy, these guys are there in all the bottleneck positions. And, people are always asking who really runs the world. Well, I'm telling you, these guys are candidates. They're part of it. We've been going chronologically since the founding of Skull and Bones in 1834, going forward in time. And we were dabbling in the 1950s in our last episode. Today, I'm going to jump out of order, and there's a reason for it. As you know, I live in a very small state, New Hampshire, and when somebody big moves into town, you hear about it. Well, that just happened, and I decided to have some fun with this guy. So, my new, somewhat neighbor is none other than this gentleman. And that's, ladies and gentlemen, Biden's National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan. And he has moved to New Hampshire, pretty close by. And
yeah, he's Brady's new neighbor.
cannot wait to run into him in the grocery store. I'm betting he's got security, though. I'm thinking this is a guy you can't really approach and say, "Hey, Jake, how about the weather?" But I don't know. I haven't seen the guy yet. I don't know what the address is. I just know it's very close by. But why? How does he relate to Skull and Bones? Well, last week we talked about the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And some of the notable names that have worked for this endowment. Every time they say international peace, all this stuff, it's all the gobbledygook code words. What they really mean is globalism.
Right.
And some of the people that have worked for Carnegie Endowment are people we've talked about in Skull and Bones. We had John Foster Dulles, was the president of the Carnegie Endowment. Harvey Hollister Bundy and William Bundy of the Bundy Bonesmen. They were involved. The Harriman family did all the banking for Carnegie. One of the guys we talked about was Winston Lord. And a guy by the name of William H. Donaldson, who we went over lately. All Skull and Bones related, and all worked for the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And I just happen to know that Jake Sullivan also worked for the Carnegie Endowment. And so I started looking into his background, and that's fun. If Victoria Newland is the angel of death, which a lot of us call her that, then Sullivan isn't very far behind. Wherever he's gone the past decade around the world, chaos usually ensues pretty quickly thereafter. I think that's a fair statement.
Yes.
We'll get there. Let's just take a look. I've got the news clip for, see if I can do this share. Don't have it anymore. Okay, well, he was on the Carnegie Endowment. Thought I had the clip from it. All right. So the reason he moved here is interesting. Sullivan is going to be teaching, and this is a direct quote, the practice of statecraft and world order at the Harvard Kennedy School, which is about an hour and a half from here, and is a senior fellow at the Carsey School of Public Policy at the University of New Hampshire. So this guy is going to be educating, making new lawyers to learn. But the part he's teaching at Harvard is great. It's the practice of statecraft and world order. What do we call Skull and Bones? The order. What do these guys talk about? The new world order. Yeah, this is still intentional. They're not even trying to hide it. All right, but let's get into his background. This master spook probably has a familiar background. Tell me if any of this sounds familiar. This isn't too exciting. Born in Burlington, Vermont in 1976. He grew up in Minneapolis. His father worked for the Star Tribune, a newspaper, and was a professor at the University of Minnesota School of Journalism and Mass Communication. Mass communication. Interesting.
That's called propaganda.
Thank you. Yeah. By the way, this Sullivan is a brilliant student. I mean, we're going to go through his accolades. He's got a pretty impressive resume scholastically. Goes to public high school, was what's called a Coca-Cola scholar, was a debate champion. He was the president of the student council and was voted the most likely to succeed in his class. So he's on a pretty good path to something. Where do you think he went to college?
Yale.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, he's not born until 76. We don't have any bonesmen. We don't have a list since 1982, so we don't know if Jake Sullivan's in Skull and Bones or not. But I think if we go through his life, you're going to say it's a pretty good chance he got tapped on the shoulder. Fair enough?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. While he's at Yale, he wins something called the Alpheus Henry Snow Prize. Now, this is something that's awarded to the senior at Yale who, and this is a direct quote, through the combination of intellectual achievement, character, and personality shall be adjudged by the faculty to have done the most for Yale by inspiring his or her classmates in admiration and love for the best traditions of high scholarship. All right.
You didn't tell me I was going to need my knee boots.
I probably should have. You may want to go get them right now because there's more of this.
Okay.
There's a lot more of this gobbledygook.
Holy moly.
Oh, there's a few other notable winners of that prize that I thought were worth mentioning. How about Skull and Bonesman McGeorge Bundy?
What?
How about, yeah, he was a Alpheus Henry Snow Prize. I guess he was a good student too. And a gentleman by the name of Strobe Talbot. Clinton's buddy. Yeah, we'll get to Strobe a bit more later. All right, so Jake Sullivan, he's inducted Phi Beta Kappa Honor Society.
Wait a minute. You left out Cord Meyer.
Who?
Cord Meyer. He's CIA.
I skipped right over it.
Cord Meyer is his wife, Mary, whatever her name, Cord Meyer. She's the one that was murdered. And Angleton ran in and grabbed her diary that she supposedly had an affair with JFK. Holy shit.
I skipped right over the name.
Okay, keep going.
Okay, no, that's a good catch. Why we do this live. All right, so Jake Sullivan is Phi Beta Kappa and graduates summa cum laude. He's on the fast track to something. So then he decides to accept what's known as a Rhodes Scholarship.
Oh my gosh.
How many times have we seen someone go from Skull and Bones to Oxford for Rhodes Scholarship?
Yep.
Now, this guy's just basically dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
So for those who don't know about the Rhodes Scholar, founded in 1902 by Cecil Rhodes. He was an Anglo-supremacist, and he founded it, and this is the quote again, to promote unity among English-speaking nations and instill a sense of civic-minded leadership and moral fortitude in future leaders. You got those boots yet?
Yeah.
And of course, Sullivan studies international relations. While he's there, he is the managing editor for the Oxford International Review.
Wow.
Seeing a pattern here yet?
Yeah.
Okay, so then he gets done with his time at Oxford, and just to go a little deep, let's go a little top a little more about Rhodes Scholars. This is basically the breeding ground for international diplomacy. They take people from all the English-speaking nations, give them Rhodes Scholars, and pump them back out of the world. It's probably a predecessor of the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leaders.
Right.
I was going.
Go ahead. Are you leaving Oxford yet?
No, not quite yet.
Okay.
I was going to go through the list of all the notorious people that have been Rhodes Scholars, but that list is way too long. It deserves a show or two of its own. So when we jump across the pond, we're going to have to spend some time on Rhodes Scholars.
Right.
Anything else you want to add, or can I bring him back to America?
Well, no, because he also was the Marshall Scholar.
Yeah, he turned that one down.
Okay, but he was selected for it, right?
Yep.
And you know that I've come across this one a couple of times because one of the directors of the CIA was among its alumni. I can't remember which one, but also a whole bunch of at least one Supreme Court justice, governors of different states, and that's a really, really, really big deal as well.
We'll have to do a dive on that, huh?
Yeah, it's a big deal. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, I didn't include it today because he didn't accept it, but yes, he did get the award. I said that.
Yeah.
So he goes back. So he comes back to America, goes to Yale Law School, and there he's an editor for Yale Law Journal, the Yale Law and Policy Review, and the Yale Daily News. We talk about Mockingbird Media. This guy's getting his training wheels and all that. And remember, his father was also a newspaper writer and a professor of mass communications. Guess what he does when he gets out of Yale Law? He becomes an intern. Becomes an intern at a place called the Council of Foreign Relations.
Okay.
So he's checking every box there is, right?
Literally every box.
I don't think he's missed one yet. Okay, he then becomes a board member, what's called the Truman National Security Project. Now, there's another gobbledygook coming. This is founded in 2004 to, direct quote, develop smart national security solutions that reinforce strong, equitable, effective, and nonpartisan American global leadership. All kinds of buzzwords there.
Yeah.
Why is that? It's also interesting because who did the funding of the Truman National Security Project? Well, you didn't have to look very far to see the biggest funder was the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace.
Oh my gosh.
Detecting a bit of a circle jerk here?
Yes.
It's also funded by something called the Plowshares Fund, which is another NGO that's supposed to prevent the spread of nukes. It was interesting. All right, so he then takes a job. You're going to love it. For the globalist think tank known as the Brookings Institute.
Oh, yay.
They checked another box. It gets interesting here, but who does he work for? Well, he works directly for Strobe Talbott at the Yale Center, ready for this, for the study of globalization.
Wow.
Now, do I have that? Wow. I think I have that.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Nice little coincidence there, huh?
So just so that everybody understands who Strobe Talbott is, he was associated with Time magazine for a long time.
Hold the thought, because we're going to do a whole thing on Strobe. You can nail him in a second, but good job. I'm glad you had that.
Yeah.
We're about to get to Strobe.
Yeah, because he's got CIA like all over him, but go ahead.
Yeah. But I love what they call this place at Yale. It's called the Yale Center for the Study of Globalization. And they get mad when we call them globalists with all these fancy titles, and they just put it right in there. So let's talk about Strobe Talbott. Okay. Born in 1946, Dayton, Ohio, attends the Hotchkiss School in Connecticut, private school. Checks one box. Goes to Yale University. Odd, but no mention of Skull and Bones for Talbott, and he was there before '82, so I don't think he was. and I don't have him with any other secret societies there. But that being said, he was the chairman of the Yale Daily News. And of course, as we said, he was awarded the Alpheus Henry Snow Prize. Talbot then attends Oxford as, you guessed it, a Rhodes Scholar.
So Sullivan is a junior Talbot.
Something like that.
Yeah.
When Strobe Talbot's at Oxford, he becomes really good friends with another Rhodes Scholar. They became lifelong friends. You might have heard of him, former President William Jefferson Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
Him and Talbot become best buddies there.
Right.
He's known while he was at Oxford. He's the guy who translated Nikita Khrushchev's memoirs into English. So he's a polyglot and apparently pretty sharp guy. In 1972, along with another Rhodes Scholar, Robert Reich, who we know, they rallied Bill and Hillary Clinton to help elect George McGovern in the 1972 election. Obviously, that didn't go too well. In the 1980s, as the Colonel said, he was Time's principal correspondent on Soviet-American relations. Do you want to talk about that a bit?
Well, just from the perspective that Time keeps coming up time after time, because they are literally joined at the hip with the CIA. As a matter of fact, their people are interchangeable. People who we grew up thinking were actual Time Life, they actually were CIA. And so they are literally interchangeable with each other. A lot of the CIA stuff that they wrote in the CIA that they wanted published was given a byline of an employee of Time to pretend that it was actually theirs when it was actually written by the CIA. The fact that he spent time in the State Department, which of course is another facet of the CIA, kind of makes this guy glow really, really bright.
That's a good way of putting it. And of course, we must mention the fact that Time magazine was founded by none other than Henry Luce, alumni of Skull and Bones.
Correct.
No coincidences.
None.
All right. Then Clinton gets elected president in 1992, and he brings Talbot in to be his ambassador at large, and basically Secretary of State Rowan Christopher's special advisors on, get this, the new independent states from 1993 to 1994. His job is to mitigate the consequences of Soviet breakup. Strobe Talbot is running point when what were we doing in the former Soviet bloc countries?
We were going in there stealing all of the resources, like we did in Latin America, like we did in Asia, like we did everywhere. You had the Broward, you had Safra, you had all of those people over there basically scurrying around like rats trying to buy up all of the resources of the former Soviet Union. And exactly. He's running point on it. Yes, that's
100%. He is running point. Not a whole lot of coincidences. Strobe Talbot's got his wife's kind of notable. Brooke Shearer. She was Hillary's personal aide. She met Strobe Talbot. Her brother was Strobe Talbot's roommate at Yale, and that's how they met. And they've been married since like 1971. But Brooke Shearer, Hillary's personal aide in the White House, she's a Stanford grad.
Okay. No surprise.
No shock there. Her background was as a private investigator, of all things, before she became Hillary aide. And she's been involved in a lot of different organizations since, a lot of women's rights stuff post-Clinton years. But she's notable. She's a notable person, Brooke Shearer. Okay, then Talbot becomes the Deputy Secretary of State from 1994 to 2001. These are the Clinton years. We all know what's going on in the 90s internationally. Strobe Talbot's there for all of it. He then leaves, when Clinton leaves office, Talbot becomes the director of the Yale Center for the Study of Globalization. Then he becomes the 6th president of the Brookings Institution from 2002 to 2017. Again, the Brookings Institute is one of the biggest globalist think tanks in the world, very, very influential, with an incredible list of alumni. in and out of government. It's almost like our government's been outsourced.
Almost.
Yeah. He then returns to government for a bit as the chair of the United States State Department's Foreign Affairs Policy Board. So he's still in there calling shots.
So, and just so that everybody knows, that particular board is the one that appears to be the one that kind of guides Operation Gladio overthrows, of where they're going to focus their next coup d'etat.
Yes. So we think we're done with Strobe Talbot? Not likely. His next step. Where am I here? His next step is sitting on the board of something known as the Aspen Institute. Well, what do we know about the Aspen Institute?
That it's in the middle of everything bad.
Yeah, it's very much of a, well, let's take a look at it real quick. Always look at the board of trustees on these organizations, right?
Yep.
All right. So just do a quick glance, recognize any names. You got Margaret Pritzker. Yes, that Pritzker family. And yeah, one of the dirtier families in politics. Over here, we got a Katie Albright. Yes, her mother was former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright.
Yep.
Going down a bit, there's a few more names that jump out. Katie Curry. One of my favorites, Michael Eisner. You know who that is?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the former CEO of Disney back in the early 2000s. A lot of criticism. He was definitely he was homosexual and really pushed a lot of that agenda into Disney stuff. That's the guy who started that with Disney. So
Yep.
he's a real gem. Arjun Gupta. Pretty much what you'd expect from something called the Aspen Institute. But a lot of our biggest foreign policy people go there to speak at his annual meetings. I think there was one other name.
My favorite thing that I found there on one look was the fact that they had a Henry Crown Fellowship, and the Crown family, along with the Brothmans and the Pritzkers, all was part of a mafia-like arrangement back in the 1930s.
Okay. We done with Talbot yet? No, I don't think so. There's more.
Wait, there's more.
He also sits on the board of something called tell me if you've ever heard of this one, the American Academy of Diplomacy?
I don't think so.
We should know about this one because I didn't know much about it at all. Turns out the AAD, it's founded in 1983. It's a private nonprofit. It's a private nonprofit, nonpartisan elected organization whose membership is limited to, quote, men and women who have held positions of high responsibility in crafting and implementing American foreign policy. It's the former Spook Hotel and Spook and Diplomat Hotel. Now, these guys are actually important.
But it was created in 83, which is at the exact same time the National Endowment for Democracy is created.
I thought you might catch that.
Okay.
Here's why these guys are important. This group provides the U.S. Senate Committee on Foreign Relations with commentary on the qualifications of those who are nominated by a president to be an ambassador. If they don't like you, you don't get the ambassadorship. You have to have their seal of approval. Kind of important, right?
Wow.
Big deal. Like I said, we should have known more about these guys.
Wow. Frank Carlucci. There's a whole bunch of people on there.
Yeah, let me just read the list. I started going through this, and the first thing I see down here is Madeleine Albright, and I start scrolling down. Right. And so I'm not going to do this live because it's a really long list, but I'll give you the highlights from it. I'm going to go pretty quick. Stop me on any of these names. And this is alphabetical, no particular, it's alphabetical order. We got Madeleine Albright, John Allen, Richard Armitage, Lloyd Austin, James Baker III, Anthony Blinken. Remember, these are the people that get to decide who Trump can put in as an ambassador. They have to give the stamp of approval. Next name, Hillary Clinton. Robert Gates, CIA. How about grandson of former bonesman and president of the United States, William Howard Taft IV? Sound like an insider club to you?
Yes.
John Huntsman, former Republican presidential candidate.
Mm-hmm.
Kay Bailey Hutchinson. You notice we're getting Republicans and Democrats on this list?
Yeah, well, they're all in the same club.
Well, exactly right. That's what. How many times do I have to say it? Doesn't matter who's president. Our American foreign policy never changes because the president doesn't run foreign policy. The machine does. People like the Council of Foreign Relations or the Aspen Institute call the shots. And it's through organizations like this. How about both Laura and Patrick Kennedy? Skull and Bonesman John Kerry. H.R. McMaster. Thomas McNamara. They list Walter Mondale in memory. Yes, indeed. We got the angel of death herself, Victoria Nuland, because, of course, she has to be there. Robert O'Brien. You're going to love this next one. Your buddy, Thomas Pickering.
Wow.
Finishing up, we got Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, Susan Rice, Donald Rumsfeld, and also in memory, Frank Wisner.
And we've got John Negroponte, who was the director of national intelligence.
Yeah, it's basically a who's who of spooks and diplomats.
Yeah, he was the ambassador to Iraq right after 2001. That's where I know him from. Who was the other name? There was one more that I saw. This guy, Gregory Starr, if I'm not mistaken, that's a grandson of CV Starr, and CV Starr is the guy that basically created the insurance company over in Asia that eventually became AIG.
What do we know? We don't need to do AIG. Everybody knows that name.
But yeah, that is the who's who. Now, so when you say that, I understand how in the past they wanted to give their stamp of approval, but just like with the American Bar and those guys trying to give their recommendations to Trump, Trump has in most cases largely ignored the status quo as far as these. So is it your opinion that they are still doing that in the Trump administration, or is it just the ones that are players and not Trump?
My understanding is they really only weigh in, and they're giving recommendations directly to the Senate. They only weigh in when they oppose somebody. They're not no longer giving the stamp, but them staying silent means, yeah, that guy's one of the club. If there's somebody that they think is going to be will not play by the rules, right, they'll speak out. They certainly have that, and the Senate's got to confirm.
So definitely something to look for.
Yeah. I'll get back to Jake Sullivan.
Okay.
All right. He's out of law school. He's done working, getting indoctrinated by Strobe Talbot, and he gets an internship from none other than Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He's checking a lot of boxes. So Sullivan then goes back home to Minnesota and becomes the chief counsel for a senator named Amy Klobuchar.
Gosh.
Yeah, and Klobuchar is the one who would introduce Sullivan to Hillary Clinton, and he becomes a Clintonite that day. So in 2008, Sullivan is the advisor to Hillary during the primaries, and then when Hillary lost to Obama, Sullivan jumps over and worked for the Obama campaign for the general election. When Clinton becomes a Secretary of State, Sullivan gets named her Deputy Chief of Staff and Director of Policy Planning.
So let me real quick, just from having worked in the government, explain how important that is. So when you have any high official cabinet member, you have a chief of staff and the vice chief of staff in the office. They run everything. They are the gatekeeper. They're in control of basically everything, maintenance wise, of the entire organization. The secretary travels so often and so much that literally you can take a funnel. This is the rest of the organization. It comes down to the funnel, which is the chief of staff and vice chief of staff, and into the head of the agency. And so that is the number 2 most critical position in all of the State Department.
Yeah, and this is 2008, so that puts him at 32 years old. Young Mr. Sullivan, been groomed for this position his whole life, and as you said, no, Hillary doesn't see anything unless it's been vetted through Sullivan first.
Correct.
So he's basically doing the briefing of her.
He's the gatekeeper.
Bingo.
And how long did he stay in that job? Through the
through about through 2014. So he was there for 6 years. So he's there for everything from Syria. We'll get into
the entire Arab Spring coup d'etat.
Yeah,
he oversaw it all.
And he's one of his famous something he wrote to Clinton in 2012. He wrote this. This is public knowledge. He wrote that Al Qaeda is on our side in Syria.
Yeah, well, the CIA created all of Al Qaeda, so of course it was on their side.
Yeah, bingo. Libya, he's point man on Libya. Okay. He's point man on Libya. Like I said, this guy's practically the angel of death. Everywhere he goes, death and destruction. You had Arab Spring, Syria, Libya. It's quite a resume for a young 32-year-old. Clinton later half joked that Sullivan was probably a potential future president of the United States. Take that with a grain of salt, but I don't think she was kidding.
Right. No, he's obviously being groomed.
Yeah. He's the guy that with CIA, with William Burns with the CIA, had the secret meetings in Iran in 2013 that led to the joint, the JPA. Yeah, he's the guy leading those negotiations. Quite a career so far. So he leaves the administration in 2014 to go teach at Yale Law School, because of course he did. 2016 rolls around, and Hillary's running for president, and he is her chief foreign policy advisor.
Can I just say that when these people go and teach, they're not actually teaching, they're recruiting.
They're recruiting, they're indoctrinating.
And they travel, and they orchestrate the funneling of grant money to other entities. Just want to make that clear.
Yeah, the system is, it really is a ridiculous system. And our institutions have been so corrupted for so long, and they make it seem like it's business as usual. But it really, it really shouldn't be.
You don't leave the seat of power of cooing foreign governments to go on a siesta timeout and teach, because there's no rest for the weary. So he is at Yale recruiting for the CIA/State Department, grooming foreign people coming over there to Yale, to school, as well as directing money from the government that he just left in the form of grants to where they want them to go. So he is doing the exact same job he was just doing. He's just doing it in a different chair.
Yeah, that's why that current fight with the Harvard endowment in the Trump administration is so interesting.
Yes.
How much you want to bet that Mr. Sullivan was recruited himself while he was at Yale, and that's how he embarked on his lovely career?
Absolutely.
Okay, Hillary leaves in 2016. Sullivan goes to work for the University of New Hampshire, the Carsey School of Public Policy, just down the road. And then Biden gets installed as president. Jake Sullivan comes along, and he is the national security advisor, the #1 guy on the Biden foreign policy team.
And as the national security advisor, as my research has illustrated, you run the coups. All of the subordinate entities, the desk, the Asia desk, the African desk, or whatever, all of the findings that have to be signed off to assassinate a foreign head of state or some dignitary all go through the national security advisor. That's their job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not a small position. That is head spook. All right, so national security advisor, he kind of changed the priorities. One of the first things he does, he puts in writing, he made COVID the #1 priority of the Biden National Security Council.
Well, it was a bioweapon, so.
Well, yes, but at the same time, he's emphasizing good relationships with China, which is why you're not going to get, forever to get anything out about the Wuhan lab. They were, and we all know that Biden, had taken bribes from the Chinese, and you wonder what kind of favors they got back for it. What did they get for their buck with Biden? They said a lot to do with it. Of course, Sullivan is running point for the Afghanistan pullout debacle, and he was so bad during that, leading up to it and after, that a guy by the name of Brett Bruin, who's a former Obama White House guy, called for his dismissal. Said this guy needs to step down, but of course he didn't. He was over meeting with the Saudis right before they started intervening in Yemen. He was involved in the Saudi-Israeli talks that ended up stalling. He's the guy. He announced the U.S. would no longer pursue a system of change in China. Instead, we're going to do peaceful coexistence. That's the quid pro quo for Biden, because American foreign policy had always been to try to effect a system change in China until Biden. So that really, why do you think China had their hooks in Biden? They got what they wanted.
Can I go back just a second?
Yeah.
He was the top security person in the period of the coup of Ukraine.
Oh, we're getting that. We're getting to there. There's a bunch of that stuff there.
Yeah, in 2014, he was he didn't leave to go to Yale until June of 2014. So he was the national security advisor when we did that coup.
Okay. Yeah, he was working right. He was working right underneath Victoria Nuland. They were side by side. Yeah.
Wow.
Angel of death?
Yes.
Okay, so the Ukraine war that started in February of 2022 has Sullivan's fingerprints all over it. First of all, he goes out in public and he accuses the Russians of sending saboteurs into Ukraine to stage a false flag. Ever heard of pot calling the kettle black?
Yes, because that's exactly what they did.
Uh-huh. And he actually is the guy who predicted the Russian invasion of Ukraine several weeks before it happened. Why? Because they were going to provoke it.
Correct.
And the Ukraine disaster, you can put at his feet. Another fun one. October 2nd, 2023. He talked about the Biden administration and how they had de-escalated all the crises in Gaza and the rest of the Middle East. And he says, quote, "The Middle East was quieter today than it has been in 2 decades."
What?
That's what he said publicly. 5 days later, Hamas attacked. A little bit of egg on your face, Mr. Sullivan?
Well, and again, that was probably the warning that it was going to happen, because all of these are prearranged.
It's entirely possible. He's the one who told the Russians, Sergei Lavrov, that there would be no peace talks with Russia unless Ukraine was at the table, which is a bit problematic for the Russians because they don't admit that Zelensky is a legitimate president because they don't hold elections.
Right. Yeah, it was just a stalling mechanism because they didn't want peace.
Yeah. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to share that. I have a great picture of Strobe Talbot. I forgot to share that.
Okay, well, we'll share it.
Oops, where'd he go? Where are you, Strobe? There's the one I want. There's Mr. Talbot hanging out with his buddy Bill Clinton. All
They
right.
were definitely buddies.
Oh yeah. Wonder if they went to any islands together. Has anybody seen a list with Strobe Talbot on that certain flight list? I haven't looked.
I haven't either.
It's a good question, though. Wouldn't you think? These guys were pretty
Yeah.
close. They're why? I mean, yeah. All right. So, in a nutshell, he also some of his other wonderful successes is he's basically shaped the U.S. foreign policy towards Libya, Syria, Myanmar, among other disaster areas. Everywhere this goes, people suffer. Thank you, Jake Sullivan, for playing.
Yeah, Myanmar, I was just reading an article about them before we came on the air. That is a disaster.
Mm-hmm. Guess who shaped that? Guess who shaped? Do you want to give a little more background on that?
Well, I mean, obviously for our audience, it used to be called Burma. The It was obviously part of Chiang Kai-shek's, the CIA, formerly OSS's plan to reinsert Chiang Kai-shek into China. And so we began destabilizing it in the aftermath of World War II by trying to accommodate Chiang Kai-shek's opium KMT army there. And it has, it's had its issues all along. We have played Kingmaker there on a couple of different occasions. And then the whole bizarre thing about, I don't even know how to say her last name, but the female that had been quote unquote democratically elected got overthrown during the I believe it was the Obama administration timeframe, and they've been ran by a military dictatorship ever since. And there's a lot of warring that goes on, and the article I was just reading was talking about them attacking people's homes with bombs, and they had just captured some high-tech Chinese drone defender, a jammer, which is like, it's the only one known to exist outside of China. So obviously there's some Chinese equipment being used in that area. So very interesting article.
And Jake Sullivan's the architect. Jake Sullivan, who's going to be almost my neighbor, and who Hillary Clinton thinks should be the next future president of the United States.
Yeah.
Now, again, we don't know if he's skull and bones, but have you ever seen anybody check more boxes than Jake Sullivan?
No. And I will tell you, they're falling down on their job if he was not.
Yeah, well, we don't know what happened after 82, unfortunately. Jake Sullivan has got a wife.
Where is he now? What's he doing right now?
Sullivan? He's teaching at Harvard and New Hampshire. He's
that's right. You started there. The Harvard Kennedy School.
Yeah, the one on the class of world order. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's also teaching at University of New Hampshire. So
he is the inaugural Kissinger professor. That's enough to make me throw up. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. So I really do hope to meet him at a cocktail party at some point in time and just have a nice conversation.
Jake, all right, let's go do the wife.
All right, Maggie Goodlander is the wife. Say hi to Maggie. Can you pull that picture up?
Yeah.
All right, people, get to know this face, because this one's going to be with us for a long time. I can almost guarantee it. Maggie Goodlander was just elected for Congress in New Hampshire's 2nd Congressional District. She is not my rep, but she lives in my district, not the one she represents, Carpetbagger.
Which is weird.
Mm-hmm. Well,
how is that legal?
Oh, it happens all the time in Congress. I had a friend of mine in San Diego that ran in a district he wasn't in, but because there was an available Republican slot. Carpetbagging's been allowed a long time. I don't know. It's fair to question whether you should be able to. But she lives in my district, but does not represent me.
Wow.
Just got elected. She's only been in office for about 2 years. She was in D.C. her whole life. She didn't live in New Hampshire. She grew up here. So that's good enough. Let's talk about her background, though.
Okay.
Born in 1986 in Nashua, New Hampshire. You'd have to be local to know this family name, but she's a member of the Tamposi family, which is a real big political family in New Hampshire. New Hampshire's got quite a bit of cronyism, more so than any place I've ever lived. Not saying a lot. Her grandpa was a guy named Samuel Tamposi, who was a big Republican donor, real estate developer. Also happened to be the partial owner of the Boston Red Sox once upon a time. So
And
Maggie,
he did a development down here in Florida too.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it was called Citrus Hills. Yeah, he's fairly well known down here.
Yeah. Well, the Tamposis are known in Republican politics in New Hampshire, and Maggie ran as a Democrat, so she's bucked the trend. But as we've discussed a million times, that really the R or the D doesn't matter so much when we're talking about national politics.
Not at all.
So she goes to private high school, of course, the Groton School. She gets a Bachelor of Arts in History from Yale University. Oh, wait, are we checking boxes again? All right, she goes to Yale Law School and she's a research fellow in Lebanon, Egypt, Syria, and Libya.
Wait a minute. So let me just scroll. She had to have been. I see that she was Navy Reserve. She had to be intel, right?
Yep, she was Navy. You jump ahead.
Yep. Well, just because of what you just said, I'm not jumping ahead. Soon as I see that screams intelligence. So, holy crap.
All right. So after her Yale Law, we'll get to her intelligence here in a second. She's a law clerk for none other than Merrick Garland on the U.S. Court of Appeals.
Okay.
Yeah. And then she becomes a clerk for former Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer. Same one her husband clerked for.
Wow.
She gets done with a minute ago. She's checking boxes, isn't she? She went to work for what law firm we've talked about a ton, Skadden Arps. They've been involved on both sides of all the Trump scandals. She was there. She starts working as a senior foreign policy advisor to the U.S. Senators Joe Lieberman and John McCain.
But she has no foreign policy.
Well, she did her research fellows in Lebanon, Egypt, Syria, and Libya.
Which means she's CIA, and McCain and Lieberman have a CIA Navy intelligence person as their foreign policy advisor, which makes sense because what was John McCain doing at the time that she was his advisor? Do you know
starting coups in Ukraine?
His moonlighting job was at the International Republican Institute for 25 years. He was running the coup machine out of the National Endowment for Democracy while she's the foreign advisor orchestrating coups.
While at the same time, she's in the Naval Reserves working as an intelligence officer for 11 years.
Yes. That's mind-blowing.
Yes. Remember I told you I was really looking forward to this episode?
That's mind-blowing. And her husband's over here doing the coups from the National Security Council and the State Department. And they're coordinating with the Senate, who's supposed to be overseeing them because they're all moonlighting as coup orchestrators too at the IRI. Oh my gosh. Okay. Keep going.
All right. Next time she shows up on the radar is she becomes the counsel to the House Judiciary Committee for Trump's impeachment 1.0. That was the Ukraine phone call. She's the one who authored the 55-page report that was describing the constitutional grounds for impeachment. That's Maggie.
So, okay. So we just established that Jake Sullivan was in a key place for the coup of Ukraine in 2014. He's instrumental in the 2022 provocation, which means let me just re-emphasize in case you guys don't know, he was in the role to approve the stay behind units in the territory of the Azov battalions and to orchestrate the attacks on civilians in the Donbass region. And then this bitch impeaches Trump for a phone call.
And her husband was running national security for Biden in Ukraine when the whole Burisma thing goes down.
No, that's what I'm saying. While he was doing it for Biden in 2022, he was provoking Russia into attacking the Donbass region because as the National Security Council security advisor, he would have coordinated the CIA's underground Gladio units that were used to assassinate 11 mayors in the Donbass region, burn people alive in cars, and attack schools. He was in charge of that. And then this bitch comes along after Trump, before, and tries to impeach Trump for a fucking phone call. Are you kidding me?
They didn't want him asking questions about Ukraine.
Oh my God. And then they turn around and unleash holy hell on civilians, murdering 11 mayors. Okay.
Do you think that angel of death moniker I gave Jake Sullivan fits?
Oh my gosh.
He could have been
crazy.
He could have been the architect of the whole thing, and it's right across the dinner table. His wife's, sitting there taking notes and saying, we got to impeach Trump for doing what we did.
And meanwhile, helping McCain.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
So the impeachment fails. She goes to work as the counsel to something called co-equal. Now, this is a word salad, but you'll pick up on it. Co-equal is an activist organization that advocates, ready for this, for increased congressional funding and support for federal agencies that provide research and policy advice to members of Congress. Basically, she's lobbying for Congress to write checks to the organizations that basically do the Congress's job for them.
Right.
It's a money laundering thing.
Right.
And then this bitch comes back to New Hampshire and teaches constitutional law at the University of New Hampshire in Dartmouth from 2019 to 2021. Like, she follows the Constitution.
And again, I would bet she's actually doing recruiting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's probably pretty safe. Whether she's recruiting spooks or just future deep state operatives, who knows? I think she's both. There really isn't a whole lot of difference. They all work for the same. So, once again, Biden gets installed, and she joins the Department of Justice as a counselor to Merrick Garland, who she used to clerk for. And she worked in the antitrust. And I didn't dig too much deep into what kind of antitrust work she did, because I don't think they really did much antitrust work during the Biden regime.
No.
So 2024, just last year, she runs for Congress and wins. Her mother was Betty Tamposi, actually ran for the same seat as Republican in 1988 and lost. So keep it in the family. She beat a really awesome woman named Lily Tang Williams, a libertarian activist. Only beat her 53-47. But she is now in Congress, this spook. And let's see, what's she done so far? So far, she's one of only 46 House Dems to vote for the Lake and Riley Act. She's a big abortion rights proponent, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that she had a stillborn baby. She says that means we need more abortion rights. Shut the heck up. Big thing around here is they saying she is very interested in running for the U.S. Senate in 2026 after 2 years in Congress, and the Democrat machine might be able to get her in there. The likely opponent is Chris Sununu, who comes from the Dirty Rhino Republican part of New Hampshire, and so there's going to be one ugly Senate race. This brings up the question: do we really want spooks in Congress?
No.
I mean, it's a bit of a problem, don't you think? People that have been on the dirty tricks team. Yeah.
If
So I decided,
anybody doesn't understand how big of a problem that is, go look up Porter Goss.
go ahead.
He was a
Right?
spook. He ends up
Yeah.
being the director of the CIA. He got into Congress in a totally weird way. And he was the one that co-sponsored the Patriot Act after 9/11. Imagine that. Yeah, he was he was a disaster. He helped write the Patriot Act before 9/11. Yeah, total disaster.
But think about it this way. Congress is supposed to have oversight over the intelligence agencies.
Yes, it's
So
not
they're just
supposed
sitting
to
around
blend
it.
with it.
So instead of having oversight, they're just putting their own people on the oversight committee.
Well, that's what
So
I
I
just
asked,
noticed about her. She's on the subcommittee for oversight, investigations, and regulations, and she's a freaking CIA person.
yeah. So I asked the question, do we have, how many other spooks do we have in Congress right now?
There's a
And
crap ton of them.
okay, so here's what I found. We got Abigail Spanberger, Democrat from Virginia, 8 years as a CIA operations officer.
Yeah.
She's in Congress. We got Alyssa Slotkin, Democrat from Michigan. She was a CIA analyst deployed to Iraq 3 times and was on the National Security Council for both Bush and Obama.
Yes.
Again, bipartisan. We had Will Hurd, Republican from Texas. He's the only Republican on this list. He spent 9 years as a CIA officer working undercover in the Middle East and South Asia. His focus was on counterterrorism and intel collection.
Meaning he was doing terrorism.
Yeah, exactly. I seem to remember liking Will Hurd as a congressman. I don't remember why he didn't run again, or did he lose?
But
we also have.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I got 2 more, but you want to go and make comments?
No, go ahead.
All right. Patrick Ryan is a Democrat from New York. Was an Army intelligence officer. He was the lead intel officer for Infantry Battalion in Iraq, and his role involved analyzing and providing intel to support military ops. And then we also have Jason Crow, a Democrat from Colorado, who was an Army Ranger, but also served in roles that included intel deployments. And I'm sure there's more, but that's all I could find with a couple of days of research.
And because a lot of them don't have it like, I'm a CIA agent, right? They're in front companies that someone who's looked at a lot of them may recognize based on, like Deloitte and some of these others that are in the limelight as being CIA fronts. So yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and they don't have to have been in CIA to necessarily be part of that system.
Correct.
You can be groomed in a lot of ways. And
well, just like her. I mean, she's obviously not directly in the CIA, but you can tell that she is got tethers to that community.
Someone says, no more spooks in Congress, Eugenie 2017. Yeah, it's a problem. So just coincidentally, one of your great research, assistants, Cousin It, happened to track down a really interesting thread on X that coincides with what we're talking about today. So I want to jump over to that because it's pretty fun, and it gives an example of all the different ways these people are groomed.
Okay.
Okay. This is fun. Where am I? Oh, that's not what I wanted. Here we go. You can see that now?
It's coming up.
Okay.
Yeah, I read this thread. It's hilarious.
Yeah, let's go through it. This is from somebody named Edward Bernays. Interesting name choice, the father of American propaganda.
Yep.
But this is the thread from 2021. So good find, Cousin It. I don't know where you found it, but I'm glad you did.
Well, I reposted it yesterday or day before. Yeah.
Well, yeah, let's still do this in today for the people who haven't seen it. Fair enough.
No, yeah, it's perfect.
All right. Friendly PSA. AOC is not just a Latinx bartender from the Bronx with no political experience, but actually an establishment op with a spooky past who was put where she is to subvert America's growing leftist movement. Interesting. Tax the rich. Remember that dress? Sandy Ocasio went to Boston University, which cost $55,000 a year, and graduated cum laude with a double major in international relations and economics. He says a path that many CIA folks have taken before her. Oh, she also interned for Senator Ted Kennedy, like all political outsiders do. It's kind of funny. Have we had any Boston University connections to the CIA before? Is that one of the big recruiting grounds, or is it just the fact that it's Boston?
There's a lot that goes on with Boston University, and not necessarily per se from CIA agents, although there's been a few recruited from there, but it has to do with the companies like, United Fruit, what had their headquarters there in Boston. There's a lot of collectivism among the alumni that comes out of Boston University as it relates to this international syndicate group overall.
I took my financial planning course through Boston University's College of Financial Planning about 15 years ago, but it was remote, so I never actually had to go to campus. It was all online, but I do have a little piece of paper on it from Boston U.
Well, I went to the Dr. Hammer's process engineering, that kind of lean thing. That was all in Boston too.
All right, moving on. As an undergrad, AOC studied abroad in Niger to volunteer with Women's Health, trying to get them to have less kids, Bill Gates shit. You can find blogs she wrote there if you dig a bit, but there's a video she filmed on her trip.
Yeah, they had a coup right after she was there.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Sure, it's a coincidence.
Yeah.
Her trip to Niger was through the Niamey International Development, there's that word again, International Development Program, which is funded by none other than USAID, a known CIA front.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you know? Shortly after she left Niger, there was a Western-backed coup that overthrew Niger's government.
Yep.
After Boston University, she started a very ambitious career that she never talks about, with the help of two Israeli tech entrepreneurs and venture capitalists. She founded a book publishing company while also working as lead educational strategist at Gage Is Inc. Just bartender stuff.
Yeah. Not publishing propaganda at all.
Interesting. Whomst among us hasn't lobbied to double tax breaks for startups back when we were young and dumb before becoming socialist revolutionary leaders? Probably why she had to become a bartender. Damn taxes. He says, just because someone had a photo op with Senator Kirsten Gillibrand in 2012 doesn't mean they can't identify an anti-establishment political outsider in 2018. Please check your privilege, child. It's a really good thread. I'm seriously, how do you get a photo? 2012, before she ever thought about Congress, she's getting a photo op with a sitting senator. That seems pretty well connected to me.
I don't have any pictures with the senator ever.
Nor do I, unfortunately. Well, actually, probably fortunately.
Yeah.
Continuing. And damn, how lucky was Netflix when they decided to make a documentary about political outsider candidates in 2018 that followed AOC's grassroots campaign and unprecedented political upset, directed by a Yale alumni. Funny they throw that Yale part in there.
Uh-huh.
What's that? AOC doesn't mind someone with a life experience of being a CIA agent, being a politician, as long as their story is good. She's talking about Elisa Slot.
Mm-hmm.
Should I play that real quick? Yeah, let's play that real quick.
Number of swing districts where the Democrats are running former military or intelligence agency candidates, Alyssa Slotkin in Michigan. What do you think about that? And will you call on people to vote for these candidates?
Well, I think it all depends on the individual candidate. I don't think that a person's life experience in one way or another necessarily precludes them from running for office. I think what is important and most important is a candidate's given story. And for me, it's I'm very outspoken about being an anti-war candidate, about calling out even the domestic history of colonization in the United States. So I think it's
yeah, don't look up my history, whatever you do.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It just happened to be the day we're talking about the exact same thing that we stumbled upon this week.
Yeah.
He says, no wonder she ended up giving a lot of money that she raised from socialists and her stands to fellow Democrats with military or intelligence backgrounds. So apparently she helped fund a bunch of them. Because obviously, all the names down here. And here's some names we didn't have. I don't know I guess some of these, Mickey Sherrill, I think they won. And Andy, yeah. So there's more ex-spooks in Congress than I went through. I have to go look for some more. Remember all the BS she pulled during Bernie's campaign? Taking forever to endorse him, speaking out against the toxic Bernie bros, and condemning his Joe Rogan interview, et cetera, et cetera. Well, mission accomplished. So he's suggesting she's there to subvert the far left agenda. Yeah. Remember when conservatives tried to do a gotcha on her with his dancing video? Pretty weird how that's the only oppo they could find on her, and none of this spook shit that I'm posting. Because the AOC PSYOP is such a gift to both sides of the same empire.
Yep.
It's like he's been reading our notes, huh?
Yep.
But it's true. He makes a great point. If Republicans really wanted to get a gotcha on AOC, they could have found this stuff on their own. The internet's free. It's not that difficult.
Correct.
Yeah, so it's intentional willful blindness, which means
so
she's a useful...
If you're going to buy and they spend a buttload of money on opposition research, what are they really doing? They're just playing footsies.
Apparently. In quotes, but there's no way AOC is an establishment plant. What about all her feisty drama with Nancy Pelosi? Ah, yes, Pelosi, the politician who has never used performative theatrics before. And here she is taking the knee for BLM with her stupid scarves. That was embarrassing.
Yep.
All right. AOC's radical Green New Deal seems pretty sus after she attended the Met Gala. I can't believe I have to just use sus in a sentence. It seems pretty sus. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go back. AOC's radical Green New Deal seems pretty suspect. Thank you. After she attended the Met Gala with Bronfman, who's worth $100 million, who's a green tech entrepreneur. And what else do we know about the Bronfmans?
Yeah.
All the way back to their mafia ties from the Prohibition days.
Correct.
Among other things, certain.
They're definitely in the international syndicate.
Okay, fair. No wonder he's cool with getting taxed. He'll get all that money back in government contracts through AOC's revolutionary plan. The Green New Scam.
Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's how the game is played. This is all to say that AOC isn't stupid. All this shit is calculated, and she's brilliantly accomplishing her assignment of wrecking the movement that Bernie started. She's an easy punching bag for conservatives and great at dividing the left with her shenanigans.
Yep.
Interesting. AOC always been on the payroll of the CIA. New rule: anyone who protests with bongos is definitely a deep state opt assigned to delegitimize whatever the cause they're bongoing for. Here's the lady who ran AOC's Niger program and presumably mentored, recruited her. Now she's a Federalist Society goon, definitely a spook. And I have long not been a fan of the Federalist Society.
Right.
Because they are Lincolnian deep staters. It's a bit of a problem when they're the ones making the recommendations for judges for Trump. That's how you get disappointments like Amy Coney Barrett.
Yep.
And who can forget that the whole way AOC's campaign started was because her brother unknowingly recommended her to a casting call for a new Democrat politicians from an org funded by a Harvard alum and Silicon Valley dude.
Unknowingly.
Uh-huh. It says she really showed her cards with Cuba and Bolivia, didn't she? She went to school to be a CIA agent. AOC majored in international relations at Boston U. Their international relations program was started by CIA agent Arthur Holnick as part of the CIA's recruitment program per the CIA's own website.
There you go.
Should we call it? Have we seen enough of this? Or you want to finish it up?
Keep going.
I think it's okay. Attention. Libs and leftist cosplayers. Is it cosplayer or cosplayers? I've never known how to pronounce that. Triggered by AOCIA. I like that. And Trumpers who think it's a QAnon proof or whatever. Calm down. Trump was an op too, he says. The Empire realized that no one was buying Hope and Change or Girl Boss reboots, so they called in a clown to keep Bernie out. Not sure I agree with that, but it's an interesting opinion. Maybe we'll do another thread about it later, but you can start with this article from a trusted news source about the Dems actively trying to make Trump the GOP nominee, and then use your imagination from there. And I'm going to disagree with that article because of what he's suggesting here. You know, I was not on Trump's bandwagon from day one. I didn't believe him when he said he was going to drain the swamp. And then I saw the swamp go after this guy like they've never gone after anybody in history. And I don't think that's an act. They would not expose, they've exposed so much in their war against Trump. And that's how so many people that are watching this, you know, a lot of us never would have known just how bad the deep state was if they didn't drop their drawers going after Trump. They exposed themselves. So that's why I think this guy's wrong about that.
I agree.
The only Russian influence on 2016 was the American empire getting info from Putin's creative director, Vladislav Surkov, and bringing nonlinear warfare stateside. Here's an Adam Curtis clip on Surkov. I'm not going to watch that. I don't think that's accurate either. I think.
Yeah, so he's it's obviously going off on the hate Trump bandwagon since they've trashed the Democrats in the preceding frame. He's trying to do a equal kind of bashing here, but the stuff against Trump just falls flat for all of the reasons you just articulated. So
yeah, and we know pretty well that the whole Russia collusion was not initiated from Russia; it was initiated here stateside, and we've got a pretty good idea. We may have just talked about one of the architects, Mr. Sullivan, but
yes.
he was certainly in the right position. And again, his name is all over the Podesta emails. If you go back and read it, yeah, I mean, you see Jake Sullivan everywhere in those emails.
Yeah.
So yeah, the dirty trick started with, you know, funneled to Perkins Coie, not Russia.
But I think you reading that illustrates what we were just talking about in a very interesting way of how they use the spooks to then manipulate the people into electing them into Congress, and you end up perpetuating the domination of this foreign policy that creates and facilitates this international syndicate running the world.
Yeah, agreed. I'm going to follow that comment. I just want to see how much further this goes down. Okay, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Oh, now AOC is responding to the accusations now. There's a rumor that you're actually a groomed CIA operative that was placed in position to win your congressional seat, blah, blah, blah. Can you confirm that's all false? She goes, that one's actually true. Just kidding. My comm staff is going to kill me for that one. Of course that's false. I understand for some people it's easier to believe this fantasy than to believe a waitress and daughter of two parents who themselves were born into extreme poverty could actually get elected to Congress, but she's lying there. We already know
she went to an elite school and she lived in an affluent neighborhood. That's already been discovered.
Yeah. yeah, I bet she's still going to try to lie about it. Because, you know. So again, ask the question: should we have spooks in Congress? And the answer, of course, is no. But how do you keep that from happening? And it goes back to one of the major things we need to shift. You know, in terms of going back to what the original intent of the Constitution is, we're supposed to have local representatives, not people that come from a national political party that would spend their life in D.C. and are imposed upon us. We need to localize our politics, and the best way to do that is to defang and defund the national political parties. There's ways of doing that. I've talked about it when I do my constitutional shows, but this is going to keep happening because these people, you know, this Maggie, God, what is her last name again? Maggie Goodlander, the new congressman from New Hampshire. She has nothing in common with the people of New Hampshire, other than that she went to a private high school here. You know, she moves in here and now she gets to sit in Congress and represent you for the next 30 years. You know, that's just not the way it's supposed to. That's not representative government. That's not the self-determination. But we've got it's the government against the people, and the government's, you know, putting their own people in all the different corridors of power, so we don't actually have representation. And that's kind of the moral of today's story.
All true. No spooks in Congress and vote local.
Very good. Very good. Act local, think local. Anyway, I thought that was a pretty fun topic today.
That was crazy.
Yeah. Jake Sullivan and Maggie Goodlander.
How do you say skull and bones without saying skull and bones?
Yeah. Well, that's really the sad thing is, since 1982, we don't know who the bonesmen are among us. You know, unless somebody leaks out a list, in which case I'll be all over that. But the only thing with people, we can only check the patterns and connect the dots. And if you check enough boxes, we're going to assume you probably were.
Somebody needs, since we've got such high-tech surveillance stuff going on, somebody needs to triangulate the cell phones going in and out of the tomb on Yale. And they also need to have some type of high-tech camera surveillance there of people walking in and out of the building. And we can just keep their mugshot and find out where they go in 10 years.
It's not a bad idea. Maybe we should get Tony Saruga to get on that.
Yeah.
Send him a DM. Send him a DM.
Yeah.
We have the coordinates. We know where the temple is.
Exactly.
So. Well, next week we'll get back into our chronological review of Skull and Bones to the 50s and 60s, and I think probably 2 more weeks might finish it up.
Okay.
There's about 4 pretty interesting names that deserve some detail.
All right, it's a date. Next Thursday at noon. Do you have anything else coming up?
Well, first of all, I'll be on an airplane next Thursday. So is it possible for us to do Wednesday?
I will look at that. I'll let you know.
Cool. And what do I have coming up? Yeah. Doug and I are getting ready to jump into a long project. We're going to go through Madison's notes on the Convention of Philadelphia. So we're going to talk about what the founding fathers really were debating at the time. That's the best source because everything was behind closed doors and you weren't allowed to take material out from there. Only Madison was able to take notes, and that's our only source document, besides some letters that were written. So we're going to be going through that. That was about a 4.5-month convention, and so we have it all lined up chronologically. But we're going to be going through that. It'll probably take us into 4 months, about doing 1 show a week. But that's our next big project, and that should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
Maybe we can do kind of a takeaway every 3 or 4 weeks of some of the highlights of what you're finding. But anyway, that sounds exciting. So we just have the normal stuff, 4 o'clock. Hope to see everybody there.
Thanks for having me on. Cheers, everyone.
You're welcome. Cheers.